She also loved mornings. Even a chill October morning like this one was preferable to the rest of the day, which would be spent doing what other people wanted of her. At 9 o'clock, Adela would have lessons with her tutor, Dr. Sophus. After lessons would come lunch with her father, King Adalbert, her stepmother, Cecile, and her half-brother, Henry. Adela adored her father and 4-year-old Henry, but Cecile never stopped talking. She tended to say whatever popped into her mind, and most of the time it had to do with Adela. "Now, dear, you really mustn't stuff yourself so. It isn't at all attractive. Adela, dear, I do wish you would remember to wear a hat outdoors. Your face is quite pink with sunburn." After lunch, Adela would have to suffer through 2 or 3 hours of embroidery instruction, supervised by her stepmother, a torturous afternoon tea with the Queen and her ladies-in-waiting, and then a dancing lesson. Cecile was determined to make a lady of Adela, and it did no good to complain about it, for Cecile was sure to mention the complaining at supper, at which point Adela's father would say, "You must listen to your stepmother. She knows what she's talking about." This early in the morning, no one was ever about except for the palace servants and Adela. Her mother had died when she was born, and when she was small, Adela had done her best to escape from the various nannies and governesses her father had hired to care for her. Down to the kitchen for breakfast, and then out into the garden. "Morning, my lass," the cook used to say when Adela was a girl. Now that Adela was 17, she still ate breakfast in the kitchen, but the cook's greeting had shifted to a more respectful, "Morning, Your Highness." Worse, she scolded the other servants when they forgot to curtsy to Adela. This new deference was Cecile's doing. The Queen had put a stop to what she called lax and overly familiar behavior from the servants when she had married King Adalbert 5 years ago. Cecile most certainly would have put a stop to Adela having breakfast in the kitchen had she known about it, but fortunately she didn't, and Adela trusted that the servants wouldn't say a word. She did wish the cook wouldn't scold the others, and she would have preferred that none of them curtsy, because, except for those formalities, she felt like she belonged with them, sitting quietly at the long wooden table, eating porridge and drinking coffee and listening to the kitchen gossip, which was always more interesting than the gossip at Cecile's afternoon tea. The last weed was a dandelion, and Adela used her trowel to pry out the long root. She added the dandelion to the pile of weeds and stood up. She brushed off her smock and trousers and surveyed the result of her morning's work. Except for several patches of late-blooming daisies and black-eyed Susans, which she counted as wildflowers rather than weeds, this bed was cleared and ready for planting. Of course, the other flower beds still needed her attention, but that work would have to wait. It was nearly time for lessons. "Miss Adela!" Looking up, she saw Garth, the 19-year-old son of the head gardener, hurrying toward her. He was waving a piece of pink paper in the air, and what was that behind him? Of all things, a large magpie was hopping across the lawn. Adela stifled a laugh. "You're being followed," she called. Garth glanced over his shoulder. "Stupid bird's been after me all morning," he said. The magpie was greenish-black with a white breast and a sharp black beak. Stark white stripes across the tops of its wings made Adela think of the epaulets on her father's military uniform. "He's rather handsome, isn't he?" she remarked. "I never heard anybody called magpies handsome," said Garth. "Thieves is what they are. They'll steal just about anything." "Look how he's watching us." "Miss Adela, I've received a letter." Garth was the only person outside her family who didn't say "Your Highness." He had tried once not long after Cecile had married the king, and Adela had at first thought he was joking. "We've been friends all our lives. You've always called me Adela," she had told him. "My father says I've got to be more respectful," had been his reply. Adela suspected Cecile's influence, but Garth's sense of duty to his father was so strong that they had settled on the compromise of Miss Adela. The letter was right outside our